Hi, welcome to Building SaaS with Python and Django. My name's Matt Lehman, and this is a stream about Django and building web applications, and we work through a web app that I've been building for quite a while now, and I walk you through the features as I build things out and make my site more useful to customers. These are not fake customers. These are real people using this website. It's a homeschool application, which we'll be extending, and I essentially walk you through my development process for how I like to work on this small software as a service. You're free to ask me anything about Python, Django, or web development in the chat. That's what I'm open it up for. Please try and limit your topics to that, but otherwise I'm happy to take questions. And we'll also field other software development questions if you have them. Otherwise, we will get started with the feature, or continue on the feature that I have been working on. It's a teacher checklist feature for this homeschool application, something requested by my users, and we've been working through it the last couple streams. And tonight we're going to focus, I think, mostly on the template after doing a bit of refactoring. I do want to say thanks to a new patron, Jorn. Thank you for your contributions. If you would like to join that group of patrons that I have who help motivate me to stay on top of this project and others that I do in the Django community, you can go to patreon.com/mblehman and support me there for some amount of money per month. Okay, let's get to it. Let's get to the code and look at what we're doing. I think the very first thing I'm going to do is start with where we left off. So this is last week's stream. We were pulling in data to the context, and we had to go get the data that is relevant to this checklist from a different view. So we refactored some things, moved some data around, and made this get schedules method available on the school year object, which is going to be critical to what we have to use for this schedule that we need to see, which is a teacher's checklist for a particular week. So I think where we'll start is we'll start by loading the application, and we'll see how this goes. Hopefully, everything is working as desired. I did make some changes to the stream this past week as well, trying to continuously update things and stuff. So I've done my best to give you a little bit more real estate on the sides there. There's no more black bars on the side. I adjusted that resolution and stuff. So I hope that everything will be easier to follow as we go along. But that's just a note about the stream itself. Let's look at the actual web app and see what we've got going. Now, as a reminder, what this feature is there is a weekly view that a teacher sees of here is all of their students' courses and tasks for the week. And the request from the user was, hey, I need to sometimes have a checklist for myself as the teacher at home, and be able to cross things off or add notes about tasks that I'm doing. And the kind of the default view here of this weekly calendar view is not really ideal for that. So can I get a checklist kind of feature where I can go through and add the courses I want to add and see just the relevant information? So if there's anything that I have to do as to prepare and make sure that I know what to do for my kids, then I can do that. So that's the feature we're working on. It's essentially a repackaging of all the data that's seen here into a list format, and it will be on this teacher list option, which is hidden behind a feature flag. So if I deploy this code to my live website, teachers, which are parents typically for a homeschool app, will not see this button yet until I activate the feature, which is good because this is all you would see right now if you click that button. So we got as far as this page. We need to now add this list of info and give the ability to print it out and do whatever else that is there. Before we do that, though, I think I want to do a little bit of refactoring. So if you're not familiar with the term refactoring, maybe that's new to you, refactoring is changing the code without changing the behavior of the code. And the idea is you want to refactor your code periodically to clean up the structure of your code. The most often reasons you want to do this is for some duplication that might exist within your application. Maybe you're copying very similar code in different places, and you see that copying, and you don't want to replicate that problem even further and further. So you do some refactoring to group that into something that's usable for you, or reusable, I should say. And so that's the kind of stuff you want to do to make your application a little bit cleaner and more manageable over the long term. If you never did any refactoring on your project, I mean, I suppose that could work, but you'll probably find yourself having to copy things around, and things just tend to get messy. The term in the industry, in the software industry, is usually called bit rot. Of things have this tendency towards entropy, where things will break down or people will copy little changes here and there, and you can introduce subtle bugs in your system. So the thing that I want to refactor is this chunk of code right here, where we have this this code that needs to be pulling a school year that is available for a particular date range. And that chunk of code is the same code that exists in a different view. In fact, I think I copy and pasted it from the other view that we were working with in Django. So let's go to the other view. Let's see if we can find them in both places, and then figure out where should we put that code so that it is reusable and maintainable by both. All right, so the view that we care about is this one right here, this dashboard view. And if we scroll along for a little while, where did it go? We need a school year. I think it's in this get week context data helper method. There it is, right here. So it doesn't even take much squinting, actually. You can see pretty clearly that this code from lines 110 to whatever that is, 102, is equivalent to the lines from line 20 to line 27, with a mild tweak to specify that the name of the variable that's setting the parameters, the day that is where they're checking against, is called weekday over here and day over here. So pretty clear case of copying. And it becomes a question of, where does this go? Now, I gave myself a hint so that I don't have to think as hard about that for this particular stream. And so we're going to come over to this method where there might actually be even a third place where this is already similar or already available, and use that same logic. Yeah, John, that's a great comment. Like, looking at code often, I have to balance like refactoring or the desire to refactor with the desire to make progress, because there is a trade-off. If you find yourself always refactoring your code and you're just kind of like polishing this like rock that you have of, maybe you can get some perfect polish on it, but really it has maybe diminishing returns. So I try and balance, like, sometimes it makes sense to leave a little bit of copying, and sometimes it makes sense to actually go ahead and do the refactoring work. As a rule of thumb, and I'll just jot this down in the comments so people can check it out later, it's once, twice, refactor. That's my general rule of thumb. So, when you're working on code for the first time, if you have something represented once, okay, that's it. That's all. There's nothing to clean up. There's nothing to reconsider. If you find that you've copied your code to a second place, like I've done here in between these two views, okay, maybe that's starting to get a little questionable. Should I pull this out into some common place? Is this really reusable chunks? But when you want to move beyond that to a third place or a fourth place, that is when you should think about refactoring into something that is more reusable. And I think that this is the time to do it, because I'm pretty sure when we were looking last week at the models of this application, there was already a method in here that was actually really close, called getCurrentSchoolYear4. And if you squint at this one, whoa, look at this. There's it's a little bit different. So it's looking at the admin of the school, which is pretty much the same as the school object, because, well, just how this is wired. But this is not that different from this method. So we've got now 3 places. So this kind of triggers my rule of, like, it's time to clean this up. John, I'm curious, how was your hockey match the other night? I think that's where you were going later. Did your team win? Anyway, so let's think about how to clean this up. I think I said this getCurrentYear4 is a special case of this problem that we're trying to solve. So if you look at all 3 of these, what are they doing? they're trying to query the school year table, and they are looking for the school that the user owns. The way this has been approached in this model is to say, give me the user object, and I will look for the admin of the school, which is a foreign key on the school model, and give that user. Over here, it's with the school attribute that is on the user, but if we were to go look at that, it's really the reverse relationship. It's a property that does the reverse relationship, and effectively these are kind of the same thing. Oh, Colorado won. Okay, is that good or bad? Is that your team? I can't remember. I thought you were Canadian, so I wouldn't think that Colorado winning would be good though. Maybe you root for Colorado. So we have effectively the same kind of query with school equals school and school admin equal user. But then we have definitely the same query when we're doing a date comparison with the start date and the end date of looking at a certain day and finding it in that range. The difference is that this one is a special case where it's looking for what is the current day, whereas over here the day is not necessarily the thing we're looking for. It could be today, or it could be a weekday that's provided by the user. So it can vary. So I think what we could do is say get year 4. So that's the kind of current is the language that's scoping this to like right now. It's a very temporal aspect. And then what we care about is like just the general case of given a user and given a date, can we find a school year that matches? And the reason that this works in my modeling, just to be really clear, is I have some validation constraints on the school year record in my model. And that constraint says that no two school years can overlap in their dates. So if there is a school year, it will match something definitively. Oh, okay, I see. All right. Thanks for clearing that up, John. Hockey, regardless of whether your team is playing, can be fun to watch, no doubt. So let's put in the method signature that I think is going to be relevant, and then see if we can refactor that to get what we are looking for. So what's coming out of this method is, and what will be put in this school year variable will be one of two things. It'll either be a school year or it will be none. And the reason for that is because of this first method that is on the query set chain that we've got. So we get a filter call, which will produce a query set, and then we do a prefetch related on it to get the grade levels in this case, which will produce a second query set, like it's the modified and has some extra data added to it. And then the first operation actually does the evaluation. It says, hey, go get me one if it's there. And like it doesn't wait and delay that. So what our method signature for our method will be something like this. I'll call it get. Oh goodness. Get year. Yeah, get year 4. We'll see if I like this interface after we get this all put together. So it's a method, so it's going to take self. Actually, that's not true. This is a class method, because if we're going to reuse it in this class method, then we're going to need to be able to both to be class methods. You can't call an instance method from within a class method. So it'll be a class method, which means conventionally we'll name that CLS for class. The reason we can't use the word class is because class is a reserved word for declaring classes. When you talk about the class object as a thing that you can pass around, CLS is the most often one that I see used. So then we know we need a user object, which is, I'm going to use type annotations. Thanks, John. Appreciate that. Mirage, welcome. Apologize. It looks like Mirage to me because that's my English brain. If that's not how you pronounce it, I'm sorry, but welcome anyway. So we need a user because we have to look for a school year that belongs to a specific user. And then we need a date. And so that I'll just call day is the simplest language I think to use. And that will be a datetime date. And then what's it going to return? So it will return. This is where we'll also use the type annotation syntax that's only available in later versions of Python. So that's using the pipe character, which we'll see in just a second. So we'll say school year or none. And this is the way to specify an optional return. So it can be either of those. It's using pipe in the sense of being an or operation. And so that's going to be our method signature, I think. And I'm still debating if I like that name, because it's not. There's now a couple of arguments here, so it's really, yeah, it's not my favorite. So get a school year for a user. Muragi egg. Okay. Muragi. That close? I'm trying. Get a school year for a user that fits that covers the provided date. Yeah, this is okay. Cool, got it. Muragi, I can do that. All right, so we have our signature now. It's a valid method at this point because we have a doc string. And then, but notice this is saying like, hey, you don't have school year yet. And why is that? The reason why is because this is a class method. So we're in the school year model definition. And when Python's evaluating all this stuff, it has to build up the class before it can add it to the module namespace. The module namespace in this case is homeschool, schools, models. That's the namespace it's trying to build. So Python, when it's doing its parsing, comes to here and says, okay, I've got to build this school year class. What methods are on this? And so as it goes through and does this parsing, it gets to each method and says, all right, I've got this method, I can do that. And what's the problem with this code as is that school year is the name of the class that it's currently trying to parse through. And so it doesn't have that token available to the namespace yet. But with newer versions of Python and this new annotations feature, what you can do is it will kind of not care about the fact that it's not fully parsed. And I'm not really describing this super well, but watch and see how it goes. So we can say from future import annotations, and the future module in Python is this sort of special module that you can opt into certain features that are coming out in later versions of the language, but can't be turned on by default for certain reasons. And annotations, these special type annotation changes, are one of these areas. If you ever worked on Python 2, commonly there was one that was used all the time. It was called, I believe it was from future import print function. And there was a change between Python 2 to Python 3. In the Python 2 version of the language, print was a statement. And what that meant really is that you wouldn't call print with parentheses. And it seems like a weird thing to change. Like, why would you change that part of the language? It was this reserved keyword. And why would you want to make it a function? Well, there's good reasons to make it a function. Like if you go and look at like, how would you make print go to something else besides standard out? And the syntax was really funky back then. It was so it was print, and then I think you would have whatever your string is. So you'd say some string, and then you'd have to do this like double arrow thing, and then you could say sys.standard error or your file or wherever else you wanted to go to try and print something. And that's how you used to have to do it in Python 2. But Python 3 came along and said, hey, wait a minute, that's silly. We've got functions are pretty awesome, right? So we can just say print as a function, and now we can use some string, and guess what? We get the benefit of saying, I I want to put this somewhere else, and I believe the option is file. So you could say file like this. And so the consensus among the community is that this second version was just a lot clearer. So they made that change. So that was a tangent, but it was this idea that sometimes the language makes backwards incompatible changes, and this annotation stuff is part of that. So with this annotations work, now that school year thing that we have, where I'm using school year or none, is available to me because we've signaled to Python, hey, treat this file a little bit differently when you process it. And so where does that leave us? We can now take, which code should we take? Let's take maybe this version, because it's already got, well, it doesn't really matter. So we're going to come down here, and we're going to paste this in this way and indent it. And this is going to be returned pretty directly, so we'll do that. And instead of school, we don't have a school, but we do have the user. So we can use the Django syntax. We can match it up based on the user that's given. And then we're going to have this day is the thing to query. So now we've got our refactored version here. And I am introducing a bit of inefficiency in this refactoring change that I'm about to make. The way this operates right now is it does not try to query the grade levels table along with that. But this code over here does. It says, hey, go ahead and get me the grade levels too. And so if I refactor this chunk of code to use this new method that we just added, I'm going to be pulling along with one extra query to go get any grade levels related. And I think that's acceptable in this case because I'm going to use this in a few places, and I don't think the performance of doing one extra query to get the associated grade levels is going to be a problem, because it's going to be pretty common that I'm going to want the school year, and if I'm asking for a specific date, I'm probably going to want the grade levels that are associated with it too. So it's a trade-off, right, of getting this efficiency. The other way that this could be handled is I could say don't do a first operation. And instead, this could be returning a query set instead of the actual first. And that essentially would delegate the problem to the caller. And so the caller could then say, get year 4, or but it starts to break down in what its meaning is. Like, this is very much tries to be a singular, so it needs like a clear answer. And my two approaches for this is I could either I could change the filter to a get, although that would still have the same problems actually. It would just raise an exception. So I'm wanting a singular thing, but the only way to make this more efficient would be to return a query set, which is like a list of potentially a list of things. It's kind of a lose there. Hope that made sense. If it didn't, let me know, and we can talk more about that. All right, so now that we have this new method, let's call it. Let's do this. So we should be able to say, for the moment, I'll just comment out this line so you can see it in comparison. And we can say school year is equal to the class. That's what we want to call. And we want to call get year 4. And we've got the user, and we've got today. So it simplifies this code from this 3-line thing down to this 1-line thing. Yeah, I think that's what we want. So we should be able to delete that. Got that cleaned up there. So it cleans up the models a little bit. And we should be able to come down here now and say we need to query the school year. So that's the same kind of style, but it's school year is equal to school year dot get year 4, and this is going to be the self request user. And oops, there's a second argument there. And it needs a day. That's the other value that goes in there, because you can see that's the name of it locally in here. And so we should be able to delete all that code. Now, is anything else using this school? Something must be using it. School year. No. Okay, I think we can safely, or am I just not seeing it? Maybe this is a pretty long method. So, oh yeah, there it is. It's farther down. All right, so we can't delete that school line, but we do get this cleanup of having that over here. We can come over to this one, and here it's not called day, it's called weekday. That's not a problem. Pretty easy thing to clean up. This is now a function-based view, so we can't access the request from self because there is no self, so we just drop the self part. And then we can get rid of all of this. All right, now we're not using the school object, so we can get rid of that as well. And I think we can get rid of the comment. So very quickly, by doing that bit of refactoring, we've cleaned up a bunch of stuff. Now, the other thing to note about refactoring is it's good to have good test coverage. And my app has 100% test coverage, so that doesn't mean it's like I've perfectly tested my app, not by a long shot, but it does mean that if I should be able to catch really common problems. So let's see if I broke anything by doing this. And if I did break anything, it's likely a query count. So there are a couple places where I count the number of queries, and it might have gone up by 1. We'll see. Apparently not, but I have a place that is uncovered. Teachers' views. That's our new, that's this line right here. So we're still missing some tests on this new view. That's okay. This is new code, and I've not pushed this out anywhere. So we need to write some tests on that in a minute. So it's okay for it. It's missing a line for now. All right, so let's run the web server with the debug toolbar on and make sure that we're actually getting the data that we expect. And I think I showed this last time of the context data showing up there, but I just would like some visual confirmation that the change we made, although the tests say we got it right, is sometimes it's nice to see that actually visually in the browser. So by turning on the debug toolbar, I've got this new sidebar thing that I can pop out, and I can actually we can look at the query, and somewhere in here it's going to look for well, where is it? Here's the school year. I would expect, oh, here's the grade level part. So notice they're like right next to each other. So we asked for both because we expected both. Is trying to optimize it a little bit. That's not really what I want to see though. So coming over to the template section, you can toggle the context, and you can see that this is still the structure that we're going to be rendering soon. But we've now got the cleaned up method that should make that process much easier. Okay, I think we're ready. Let's close. Oh, I didn't save this file. Maybe that's why query count didn't change. All right, now I'm curious, because I was a little surprised that it didn't complain about a query count going up. Well, maybe I shouldn't be. The dashboard already tried to do some optimization, and that refactoring I said was being aggressive about the optimization. So if I expected anything to fail it would be the place that used get current year for, but it probably didn't do any query checking. But some sanity checking is okay. All right, same result. All right, so we're done with the core views, and I'm going to bring up the teacher test views file. Teachers test views. The reason we're not seeing line 22 being executed in any way is that this current test is really boring. It doesn't assume anything. It doesn't make a school year that has anything to do with the user right now. So because of that, it doesn't actually ever come in here and try and get some schedules. It's not even trying. We could change that pretty rapidly by creating a school year record that's associated with that user. So we want to, and let's go ahead and do that, because that's the sensible thing to do. This schedule, this page will have an empty state of, if there is no school year, somebody could, in theory, get to this checklist. Do I even want to design for that? I don't know that I do, because I don't think I'm going to display. Sorry. Let's look back at this page. Ooey. Let's run the server and look back at the page. The week view has this teacher checklist button, but the user is never going to see this button unless there's a school year. I guess the other scenario, okay, we're still going to need to account for when is there no school year, because I think, well, maybe not. Sorry, I'm talking this out and I'm not really communicating all my thoughts. Like half of them are in my head and half of them are coming out on the stream. So let me be a little bit more explicit. How can the user get to that checklist page? The only route currently is by clicking this button. In theory, someone could come up here to this URL and change the URL to something that doesn't have a school year. I'm not going to program to that. Like if they messed with the URL manually to go to some school year and maybe they typed in like, I don't know, 1018, like something obviously not in anybody's lifetime, like I'm not going to try and find and display a school year for that sort of scenario. So I'm not worried about that one. The other possibility that I was thinking of is on this week view, there is this ability to go back and forth in time. So that anybody can check their history. But if the user goes to a week that doesn't have a school year, they don't see the rest of the UI. They see this page that says, you don't have a school year running right now. And in that scenario, the teacher checklist button's not going to appear. So I think this is convincing me that it's not really worth programming for the scenario where a school year is missing when the page doesn't display. I still want to display it a little bit, and I've already guarded against that with this one line of code of if school year, because it doesn't make sense. We can't even call this get schedules method if the school year object is none, so we had to protect that. So essentially, if someone did manage to go to the page and they plug in the wrong year or the wrong month for something, and they were trying to manually manipulate the URL, essentially this line right here, line 20, is going to kick in. And what they're going to see on that checklist is this right here. And I'm not going to give them any extra information right now. Maybe somebody will complain of like, hey, I didn't see anything, and what was I supposed to do? How was I supposed to know? I don't really think that's going to happen in 99.999% of circumstances. Okay, convince myself that not worth trying to fret about a scenario like here right now where there is no school year object. So we need to create a school year record, which will give us that line of code coverage that we're missing, because it will go into line 22 and actually pull schedules. So let's do this. Let's go up to the top and we will do from homeschool, schools, tests, factories, import the school year factory. Factories are awesome. I've not done a bunch of unit testing on the stream in a while, but as a reminder for anybody who might be joining the stream for the first time, there's this really great package called Factory Boy. It's modeled after a Ruby library that was formerly called Factory Girl, now is called Factory Bot. So the naming came about as kind of the inverse of the Factory Girl thing, but then the company that had the original renamed their thing. So after Factory Bot now. That's why it's named Factory Boy. And this helps generate test data. So you can use a factory to take whatever models you might have and generate a representation that is accurate. This is useful because models will get complicated in a hurry. Models will start to have foreign keys to other things that are required to be filled out. And you in your test don't want to have to worry about building up all of the necessary data just to get a school year to work with. So the factory system fills in all of those holes and will fill it in with placeholder values that you may not care about most of the time, but when you do care about them, you can override them. So we're going to build a school year with the school year factory. And you call it like you're instantiating an object. And then you give it the parameters that match to your model name. In this case, we need to build a school year for this particular user so that they have something to go to. And so there is a foreign key on the school object, and you, just like in the Django ORM, you can use the double underscore to get at other attributes if you need to set deeper down into the model hierarchy. This is part of what's so cool about Factory Boy. So we can set this admin to be user. And then we can, furthermore, we need to make sure that our date range matches something that that fits for this particular date that I set. So I wrote this test on June the 15th, so we're going to do the same date. But our week object here sets a start date and an end date. So we can create a school year with a start date that matches the week start date. I think that'll work. No, it won't, for reasons I'll describe in a minute. So the first day, like that. Will this work? Well, actually, maybe it will, because this week calculates the first day. It always goes back to a Sunday. Looks at the previous Sunday. That's just how I've modeled it in this app based on the request of my users. So if I set a school year that is going to be a school year for a single week, that sounds kind of stupid, and it is kind of stupid, but it will work for this test, I believe. So this makes the test, if we set it to last day, now we've got this school year factory object. Whoops, too many parentheses. There we go. That will create a school year that when this query happens and the weekday is provided, then it will produce the same school year that was created for the factory. So this test should still pass. We didn't change anything about the assertions. But the difference is, if we run the coverage thing again and let that run in the background for a minute, we should be hitting that line 22 that we weren't previously hitting. Okay. I have a ton of tests that are actually checking this get schedules thing. So I'm not really concerned about asserting that the scheduled data itself is right. I know that's right. Or I've proved to myself that it's right by other testing. So there's nothing to really check on here. And I think I do want to assert that that it's not none. That would be useful. That at least will assert that it's in the context. Or it doesn't even have to check against none. We can just say, is it in the context? So let's do assert self get context with schedules is the thing we're looking for in the context. Now we've got 100% coverage. That's cool. And assert. Oh, it's an empty list though, so it's not. Okay. So let's do it. Is not none. So an empty list evaluates to false in Python. So this was because there's no data in the school, it was coming back as empty, which then evaluates to false. So we need to say that at least we're checking that it's in there. And there might even be, okay, what is here for context? Hold on a second. Let's cycle through some of these and see if maybe there's a better helper method. I am using, in case you're like, what is this stuff? I'm using a library called Django Test Plus, which is pretty awesome. No, okay. There's no method. It's just for checking context. So we get the thing from the context, and then we make sure that that's not none. So Test Plus is pretty cool too. Plus, yeah. Test Plus is brought to you by Frank, but Frank is a well-known Django person. I think he was the Django president for some amount of time. Sorry, Frank, if I'm getting that wrong. But he's got a consultancy that does a lot of Django stuff, and this is the test library that they generated. It's got these really great helpers in. Oh, there's one. Hey, there it is. Assert in context. Okay, that's the thing we really needed, not this is none stuff. So let's say assert, and we don't even need this extra assert stuff. Self assert in context. And that might not be coming from Test Plus, that might be coming from Django's test case. I don't remember. Although the fact that we saw in the documentation would hint that it probably came from Test Plus. But what Test Plus does is it provides you a test case class that has some extra helper methods on it. So if you need to do quick get and post and some of these other things, they're right there. So really, really cool library. Cool toolbox of testing tools. And I'm pretty sure that passed. So, yeah. All right. So we've got our confirmation that there's the schedules are in the view. The week object is in the view. It matches what we expect. And now I think it might be time to render this. I'm going to loop over some stuff. We'll come back through. We'll, I think what I'll do is I'll put in some dumb looking markup that will just prove that we can loop through all the data and all the bits. And then after that, we can come back and improve that structure with Tailwind CSS to give it the actual style that it needs to be. All right, so this thing exists in checklist.html. And I'm gonna need a reminder of what's in schedule, so we'll run it with the debug toolbar. And we're going to go to teachers checklist. And here we are. So let's return to, is this the right one? Yeah, this is for the current week. Expand this back out. So schedules is the key that we're going to go over. So we're going to use a for loop in the template for schedule in schedules, and that's where we'll start. Now within the schedule is a list, and each list is it's a list of dictionaries, and that dictionary has a set of courses, which we will descend into in a minute, but it also has a student, and it's got this week date stuff. I think the week dates is needed on that weekly view. Here, let's go to that other page. It's needed on that weekly view because before I get into the schedules, I need to display this row across the top of all the dates. And in a list version of that, I'm not going to need to display that row. I'll have that as I get deepest into this like nested list structure. So we can ignore this. It's really just something that is needed by this kind of graphical representation here. And the reason that I need that is that my school years, the way I've modeled school years, it can vary on the number of days that are part of a school year. So it's not guaranteed to be 5. It could be 4. It could be 7. It could be 1. It depends on how you want your school year to go. But for our purposes, we can ignore it. But what we do need to do is show that this is for a particular student. So we're going to group it by student and then list over each student's courses, and then within each of their courses list all of the tasks that they have. So we'll put an H2 here, and I'm not even going to try to put any styling on this yet. We'll come back to that. But we'll say schedule, and I'll just, I guess, leave it at student. Student itself is a model, but the model has a string method on it. And so that because it has that string method, it will give the representation that I want to show for students within the system. So just by doing this, we should see, and go back to the page, we should see 2 things appear. We should see the names Mark and the names Faye. Those are the names of my kids that I use for this sample data. All right, so refresh. Oh, it gives the full name. So it's not what I want. I want it to match the way I'm displaying over here. So I guess we should use first name. Oops. All right, now we've got Mark and we've got Faye. Now it's time to descend into the next layer here, and that's another for loop. There will be multiple courses. For course in schedule courses, we've got our next for loop, and I've grown to become fairly liberal with the white space in my templates, mostly because I find that it makes it easier to manage the templates in future sessions. Some people might be like, but you're sending extra bytes to your users, and it's true, I am. So the size of the HTML page might be slightly larger because there are extra new line characters that would be transmitted. But remember, most web servers are doing compression, and compression algorithms are fantastic at cleaning up that kind of stuff where there's repetition. You're going to get huge compression ratios on that kind of thing. Yeah, in fact, the new lines I think are not even a big deal, because think about this. Even though it seems like there's not a lot here, I mean, there's 4 spaces right here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. So all of these, all the indentation is space too. So I think it's just not worth fretting about bytes within your HTML. Some people might be tempted to do so, but almost guaranteed, if you have areas of optimization within your app, templates are going to be one of the last places you want to go. 99% of your time in a web app, the optimization problem is at your database and doing some inefficient querying. So don't come to templates looking for squeaking out a couple extra bytes that you think might make stuff go faster. And always measure. Okay, off that soapbox. Next layer here is in this structure. Let's come back over here. We have a course. And so this courses list is another list, and it's composed of another set of dictionaries, and that dictionary has two things in it. One is a course object, and this other is this list of days. So we want to pull the course object out and get the title there. Now this time I think we can use the course. In fact, because of this is actually not a great name. So it's really like this dictionary of course details. I'll call it course detail because the course, I don't want to say course.course. That'll look weird. Or I think it will look weird. I don't know, maybe it won't. Maybe we can try it. So we've got course detail. We should see programming, math, yep, science and reading. We've gotten one layer deeper. None of the styling is here right now, so it kind of looks like trash, but that's okay. All right, time for the third level of nesting. And that's within the course, this course detail thing is a day, which in and of itself is another object, if I recall. Yep. So there's one key that we can be sure of is in here, and that's this week date. Okay. But there are other pieces that may or may not appear in here. And here's where things can get a little complicated. We actually might want to go back and update the test data so that we can see some of this variation. So school break is listed as none. Okay, so maybe it has all the complexity already in here. We've got guaranteed a week date. That will be in there. The school break may be none, or it may have a value. And there is maybe a task, or there may not be a task. From a teacher checklist point of view, I think the teacher will only care if there is a task for that day. Like, I don't want to burden, because I'm imagining a teacher wanting to, like, okay, I'm at my week, I'm at the start, I want to print out the list of all of the things I need to be worried about. And they don't want, there's nothing to do on a day with no task, so why bother printing that in a list? So I think we only care about entries that actually have a task. That'll become useful in a second. We'll be on the look for that. But first, we need to actually have this day object. So we'll call it day. Yeah, we'll call it day. And then it is for day in course detail days. Now we've got our list. All right. So here is where we can use, how boring is this going to be? Probably a little bit more than nothing. I think we probably want some consistency in the width of this output. Well, let's just put all the details out and we'll see it or not see it. So we only care if the day has a task. So that's an if guard here. And you want to be really minimal in your templates about doing logic checking. It's okay, I think, to check for the existence of a piece of data, but don't have tons and tons of stuff. So if a day has a task, that should be sufficient there. Then we want to display something. Else we don't. For the moment, let's just put a div right there and say day, week, date. See what that shows us. This should show us the dates for any day that has a task. Okay, that's about what I expect because the compared to the week, and so we know there are 3 Python tasks to do, and there's 1 math task. So there's 3 Python tasks, 1 math task. So I think this is right. That might be it. The rest of this might be styling. And of course, the ability to actually see the tasks. So there's probably little details in here that need to be pulled out. So all of the interesting work is going to go right here. And I think the way I want to do this now, how do I want to do this is the question. What do we want to show? My gut tells me that we should show the date on the left-hand side and then the task on the right-hand side. And the reason for that is the left-hand side, all of the dates should be about the same width. So we can constrain that and don't have to give it a lot of space. And then the remainder of whatever we display can take up a lot of space and potentially even line wrap. Yeah, that feels right. So this whole thing, this whole for loop thing is going to be itself wrapped in a div, and it will be a class. Let's make this a flex box. So here's where we're going to start getting into Tailwind styling. And so we need to close this off. So this whole thing's going to be a flex box. And flex row in Tailwind CSS is the default. So you could say flex row and be explicit about it. I don't think I need to. This is just what I want. Well, now I'm doubting myself. Shoot, maybe I should be explicit. Let's go to Tailwind and check the docs. Flex row. Well, let's go to the flex section. Direction. I don't know what this basis stuff looks new. Interesting. Initial size of flex items. Huh. This is all new to me. I've spent plenty of time with Tailwind, but they say when this came about? I don't. All right. Oh, cool. Something to go read more on later. Well, I thought for sure it was documented somewhere that the default would be flex row. Maybe it is still somewhere, but I don't know. Doesn't really matter. We can prove it by doing. Would we see this if we? Yeah, I think this will be right. Is that what I expect? Yes, it is. Maybe we actually want this to be flex column. Sometimes I get a little confused about the directions on this stuff. So we want it to go down by default. Yep, yeah. And then within that, okay, now I'm getting myself oriented. I'm trying to create a table effect. And so I want to say row, 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 and then within the row, it can go this way. But in order to go down first, you need to have a column style. So this will be, we change this to flex column. Now those dates should still go vertically. Yeah, all right, that's what I want. So we've got a flex column. And we need to, within that flex column, we're going to have, there'll be one div per day. Because that'll give us, that'll be effectively create a row for us. And here we can say, put another flex box. And this is where we're going to get our row of actually date and task. Flex row will be explicit this time, although this still needs to be inside of that if statement, because we only want to show rows when there is a date or when there's a task. So now we can move this one in here, and just for, well, no. Let's put it like this for now. See what happens. Okay, cool. It's taking shape a little bit. All right, first thing I want to do is I want to use the same style that's here for this particular header. Should be an H2, yeah. So let's take all of that and we will add it. Whoops. Paste it here. And that should give us the same exact style for the Mark and Fay. Now what it's not doing though is giving us spacing. So we might need to adjust. And I didn't do the spacing there because on the actual like weekly view, there's kind of space already because of this one cell that sits empty between the row and then the actual courses. So let's put a little bit of gap below it, and we'll say, well, we'll do vertical, horizontal and vertical, maybe? No, we'll just do space this one element right now, and then at the bottom, we'll push this thing, this other one later. This will make more sense in a minute, I promise. Okay. So now we've got some space here to give some breathing room, and then we're going to change this style for the programming, and that we'll have some space too. And then we will have, I don't know if we'll do a table style. I don't think we need anything that complicated, but just we'll put space between these things with some flex column sizings in a minute. But notice what I was talking about right here is like there's no space between these two, but I don't want to just add vertical spacing on both sides of this particular header, because what it would do is it would push the first one down. It would fix the problem of there's a gap here, but it would also push the first one down too, and that would I think that would look too much of a gap between the header and that first one, which I suppose I could adjust by adjusting here. Maybe I'm convincing myself that that's okay. So let's adjust this. No. I want to keep with this plan because for good reason, I promise. Well, let me think through this. The thing I'm about to do will only be effective if there is a course for a student. Otherwise, it will be right next to each other. But I think that's probably okay, because if someone's coming to the checklist and they don't have courses for their student, why are they coming to the checklist? So let's put the margin bottom 4 right on this row thing for each of the courses. So that's going to give some spacing between programming and math, and we'll push down Fay as well. Now we've got some reasonable amount of spacing between these things. Maybe. I think once we've got the basic styling in place, I'm going to play with a bunch of the spacing numbers until I get something that's aesthetically what I want. The other thing we can check against maybe is the daily view. Now that uses a table. I'm trying to think of another place where I have some kind of list style. I don't think I do that in a lot of places. I usually use tables in the app. But there might be a report to check. Progress? Nope. No grades yet. Attendance. That's also, see, it's also kind of a table. It's a 2-column table thing, which is not what I want. I don't think it gives enough space to make notes or do anything. And the resource report, there's nothing there. Okay. Well, we're going to plow ahead. We'll make something that looks pretty decent. Maybe I will take this style for this class, though. So it's got an underline. I don't really care about that part. But the text small, uppercase, tracking wide, font extra, all of that stuff. That's what I want. We'll put that on here. Close that off. Don't need the flex 1. That's for something else, but the rest of these are attributes that are kind of describing the look and feel of that course label. Come back to the checklist. This should change from this very basic programming text to that thinner, all caps stuff. So it's starting to fit more into the application. And it's given the space that I want to give it. Okay. For this test to truly be effective as well, I want to change one of these tasks to be something much longer. We'll see why in a minute. Let's change this one right here to have, let's do this, we'll copy this and just put it so there's like, there will be scenarios in the usage of School Desk where people will put in longer descriptions. So there's one. The other thing I want to make sure that we have a test for is line breaks. So with a line break and another. You can see here that these things already account for this. They wrap accordingly, and then they figure out the line breaks accordingly. But if you know HTML, you'll know that a new line character or a carriage return line feed, and if you're in Windows, will not just automatically display. That takes some special consideration. And there's actually code that I've got in this template to make this kind of stuff work so that people see the spacing that they want. So if we come back to the checklist now with these new things, what we're going to see is this stuff will just like scroll off. Kind of wrapped and forced itself to fit something like that. So yeah, these are all of this UI consideration. Yeah, you're right, Maragi. These are hard things. They're not, oh, I shouldn't say that. They're not hard to think through, but they're things that experience will tell you is like, and I think what it does for me is it gives me an appreciation for anybody who's doing front-end work. Like, front-end work is hard. And I'm not even touching on a ton of the accessibility stuff. Like, you can get deep into doing really accessible stuff for the blind, or maybe not the blind. Yeah, the blind. But those with vision challenges too, focusing on like what has enough contrast. So those who are visually impaired might need that stuff. Where the blind might come in is like they're using screen readers that allow them to go through tables and go quickly through a page just based on text. I am not taking that level of detail with my app right now. I don't have the need to serve those kind of users in my current scenario, and I do think that the designs that I have done, while not explicitly designed to be accessible, are fairly simple enough that I think that a screen reader could do okay. I don't know that to be true though, so somebody could probably try out my site and say, hey, your stuff sucks at accessibility. They might be right. Okay. So let's do first the very first thing I want to do is, right now we're just printing these out as a full American style month, date, year thing. And I have a style within my app that I want to follow, which is just a month and day. And maybe I don't want to do the full day name, although my users might come back and say like, hey, I want the day name. And I guess I really have two styles. So should I do month date like this, or should I do this abridged three-letter month date as pictured with the weeks? What does my daily view do? Well, my daily view is probably not even going to show that, because what's the point? It's all the same date. It's just going to show it in the header. I don't know. This feels a little just slightly classier to me than doing with the number style. I don't know why. Just this is pure aesthetic and opinion taste come in. So let's look at the daily template and see what that header is. It's using the date filter, and it looks like it's N, capital N, and lowercase j. So if we come down to this week date and we use a Django filter, which is the pipe character, and use date, and then give it the format string, that's what's in the string here, with capital N and lowercase j, then all of those, or most of those width issues should be resolved if we come back to this page. Because you can see there's some variability. Well, maybe not some. Yeah, there will be variability. Like, look, come down here and see from June to July. So this is maybe not as apparent because both of those are pretty short month names, but there will be month names that transition. Like July to August is a much bigger transition that would be really evident. So by picking a three-letter name, that's going to smooth out most of that stuff. Oh man, why did it do? What's going on here? So it gave the full month name here, but the short name here? What? No. M is the one that I'm using. Okay. There it is. Okay. And it's still, I'm not using a fixed width font. So even with three-letter names, there's still some variation. You know, you can see the N is wider than the L, so the 1 doesn't quite line up. It's not going to be perfect. And I'm not going to try and make it perfect. I don't think that's really the objective. The objective is to get something that looks reasonable. Okay, but now we definitely need to solve this spacing problem. The spacing is just a hot mess. So we're going to come into Tailwind, and we can use some width utilities. Yeah, width. And so you can see there are widths that are fixed. There are also widths that will be based on fractional amounts, and this is what I want to use. So I want to use one of these fractional amounts, probably 1/6 and 5/6. but there's still other problems that we have to work through, which will be present in a second. So let's start with width 1/6 and 5/6, and let's see how that looks. So coming over to this thing, we'll put right here class width -1/6, and we will repeat that chunk of code and then replace the 1 with 5. And so, yes, that worked, but this is why I added in that test data. This goes on forever, and typography. All right, here's a typography lesson. I took a typography course in college, but there's plenty of places to learn about this. In fact, LinkedIn Learning has a typography course. I've taken a bunch of stuff. It used to be called lynda.com. If you're in the States, I can't speak for other places, but my local library had access to LinkedIn Learning for free. I mean, I'm sure I'm paying with my taxes, but check out sites like that. There's tons of good learning if you are at all interested in design. But one of the things that they'll teach you in a typography course is that when you are reading a book, the rule of thumb for how wide should the thing be before it wraps is about 2 alphabets, so 52 characters or so, and that's just it. The reason has to do with how our eyes track stuff. So if I'm looking, like, our eyes move in jumps, and so this is all Python book repeated over again, so there's really nothing interesting here. But if I was trying to read this, and I've got a screen as wide as this is, which I expect a lot of users will have larger screens, I have to jump to, probably 3 or 4 times just to see all of it from left to right. So it's just more natural for our eyes to have to do fewer of those jumps. And we can do that by artificially constraining how wide does this flex box get. And we can do that with, I think it's max width. Oh man, what's it? Max? It's got to be in here. There it is, max W, and then you give it some value that you want. So here's our, we can put it on this whole column, and it can say max W. Let's just start with 2XL and see how that looks. So now, what we're dealing with, we're still dealing with percentages, 1/6 and 5/6, but instead, we're not dealing with that across the entire dimensions of the screen. We're just dealing with it in this flex box that we've given a bounds to this stuff. So I think that adds to the legibility. I'm not going to measure that out of how many characters is that. I don't really, it doesn't have to be perfect. This is where taste comes into play. But this seems like a reasonable amount. It's just a little bit longer than the title, but we'll keep playing with it, especially as I might want to adjust. There's probably some stuff about adjusting the font of this text. Like I don't think it matches my style yet in other places. So let's look at some of this text and use the same formatting there. Okay. Text small. Okay. We'll put that on, this formatting on the flex row so that all of the row content will have the same styling. And I'm going to get rid of the flex 1 thing that was for the table. And I'm also going, well, I'll leave the padding for a moment, see how that turns out. But I want text small, I want the font to be light. I don't know that I'll need the overflow because we've given it a lot of space. But I'll leave that. It's probably, yeah, that's probably okay to leave. And I don't need a background of gray here. Which also means I don't need to have a special print background. That's what that print colon thing was. It's for when you're doing print styles. So those things, I really just wanted text small and font light, I guess, but I didn't know what I wanted until just now. Come back over here, refresh, and we've got this. All right. Right off the bat, what did I see that I don't like? The padding 2 applied to all sides, and so it meant that this stuff is suddenly now indented and not flush with programming. And that catches my eye. It's something that I can mostly consistently, I was about to say completely, but clearly this one is not the case. But within groupings, I try to line things up so that they're all flush. So we need to adjust that. And where's that actual padding present? I think it's on the whole row. Yeah, it's on the whole row. And you can see that you see where that purple box is going around the actual box. This is the inspector is really good for this. I would recommend you use it when you're playing around with sizing to give you an understanding of what all of these different classes and CSS adjustments are doing. That padding on the x-axis is not doing anything for me. So really what I'm interested in, I do want to give some spacing between each task so that they're not, suffocating each other, but I don't think I need any of the horizontal. So we can fix that by coming in here and we can change this to PY2. So only apply in the vertical dimension. All right, with that, we've got pulled over. This word wrapping seems fine. Like there has to be some word wrapping. We've constrained that with the max, but we're still missing the line break part. I guess I should have left that daily one open. So somewhere in here is the task, and there it is. There's actually two aspects of this. So I was printing this as relying on stir, but I shouldn't. I'm going to rely on pull out the description specifically. And there's a couple things I can do in here. One is use this URL eyes thing. We'll get up the default Django default. No, Django built-in template tags and filters. I'll bring that up. Oh, come on. 4.1, get on something recent. Too recent. Come on, Django, you're killing me. There we go. There's a maintained version, 4. So URL eyes, and then also line breaks BR. So let's look at those in turn. URL eyes. This is going to look through that text in the description and find anything that looks like a URL that has HTTP or www, and will automatically convert them into hyperlinks. So that's cool. That was a feature requested by my users in other contexts, and so I suspect that I'm saving myself some trouble by going ahead and putting it in now, even though nobody's asking for it. All right, the other bit is the part that I really cared about, and this is the line breaks BR. And so earlier I mentioned that a new line character, which is represented in Python as a \n, or a carriage return line feed, so \r/\n. Is that right? I think a line feed is a \n. Anyway, the representations for a carriage return in the system does nothing on HTML. HTML is going to ignore that, which is why it's displaying this way with no spaces. But what this particular template tag does with line breaks BR is it converts this character, and you can see it here, it converts it into a BR tag, which is the HTML tag that says, hey, do a line break right here. And so as Django is rendering that, it's looking for any of the new line characters and doing a substitution on it with the break tag. in a safe way. So by adding line breaks BR on this, we should now be able to come back to our teacher checklist, and with any luck, there it is. So cool. Omatola, that is a good question. So, any advice? Well, first of all, I have a couple things to note that are probably pertinent. I didn't design any of this to be a tutorial. As you can kind of see, this is very freeform, just what I'm working on today. If you go all the way back to the very first stream I did, not only is the quality terrible, like I've much improved a lot of my setup since then, but it was for a different project. So this was for a homeschool application. That was for a college admissions person. Independent educational consultant is the fancy title, but it was a totally different kind of application. So that was something, a project that never got the traction that I wanted it to, and just didn't go anywhere. So while there's plenty of interesting nuggets to learn, I don't want to discount that there's good advice in there. If you're more interested in following this project and eventually catching up to here and understanding this in context, somewhere around stream 60-ish is a stream. I think it's called New Project Who Dis or something along those lines. And it's where I set up this homeschool project for the first time. It doesn't even have a name yet. Like I'm literally starting from scratch. Even though I say that, it's not meant to be a tutorial. It's not meant to be like guiding you on here's how you start this from scratch. It's sort of following me in my journey from nothing to then some more and more and more until it becomes a minimal product, and then I start getting users, and you see that whole journey. But that, if you wanted to start anywhere, that's where you could start. I'm interested. You want to try this in Rails? Good luck. That's really fascinating to try it in a different framework. Being interesting to hear your experience later of how it goes from translating Ruby and Rails into Django. So do come back and share if you learn along the way. So as I look at this, wow, this might be the minimum viable version of this page. Let's go back and look at the issue. So a customer only really requested a couple of things about this page. And first was the ability to see this week view, which we've done. We translated the schedule that appears in this week right here. We translated into a list style right here. So success. The other bit that we haven't done yet, and we're not going to do tonight, but we'll get to in the future, is the ability to remove a course from the checklist. There may be some courses that require zero prep work. And so the user wanted an ability to say, like, I don't care about this. Yeah, you're welcome, Omatola. So I need to have some kind of ability to come in here and customize this page. And my convention for editing and stuff has been, in fact, if we can open up another one of these pages, I usually put an icon by here. It's a edit whatever you're working on. So I think what we need for this teacher checklist to make this even more useful is to say, here's an icon, and it's going to show a list, a bunch of checkboxes of everything the user wants to see or not see in their school year. And so I think once I have, so we're going to need to store those preferences somewhere. So there's going to be some kind of, there's a data requirement here, some kind of new model of what's going to go onto that. I'm not sure where that's going to go yet. We'll think through that. And then store those preferences and then display whatever is there. And that would give them the customization to say, you know what, I don't care about Mark's programming tasks this week. It doesn't matter. Let me just see math and then science and reading from Faye. That's all I want to see. But this much might be useful to my user. So I think what I'm going to do is probably deploy this and notify the customer who is asking me saying, and tell her, hey, this isn't done, but you were interested in it, and I want you to see an early version so you can give me some feedback on what you like or don't like about it. And that, I think, is a really powerful tool. It shows like, it kind of, now we're talking like customer relations stuff. It sort of brings them along, and I think will make her feel like more part of the experience of, hey, this person's building something specifically for me because they requested it. And I think it will help breed loyalty with that individual. Okay, so I think that is the end point for this stream this evening. Let's take a look at what's left. So what do we do tonight? We refactored some stuff. That's how we started, so that the data was really easy. This view that we're looking at now, I mean, it's about as simple as a view is going to be that's doing some really complicated data fetching, because we're delegating a lot of that work. So one piece gets delegated here, the other piece gets delegated here, and then there's a tiny bit of work on the other side to fetch some dates and stuff. But there's really not a lot going on here. The fact that the entire view is what, 12 lines of code, of actual code in the body, not including the doc string, that's pretty cool. And some of those, 3 of those lines are spaces. So I think we've built something fairly powerful here, and built a pretty simple template to pair along with it that does display exactly what the user's going to need. What else was in there? We've got the refactoring. So we extracted that class method. I guess I updated the test to make it more representative, but let me pause for a second and think if there are any other tests that I want. So when doing some testing, I usually think through, we have the happy path. The happy path is like, this is that, and I even give it kind of a name that hints that it is a happy path by calling it test okay. Are you okay? And I don't even define, on a lot of my tests, I give them a documentation string to say, this is what I'm testing. But test okay is just, this is the happy path. Does it work at all? The other thing I think through is access control. And we've got that with this one. So nobody can access this unless they're meant to. And then I start thinking through error conditions. Like what could happen where the application would be in a bad state, or some user might experience an error. And I did talk through the fact that somebody might get a hold of this page when there's no school year. The worst that they'll see is kind of an empty page, but I thought through all of the conditions of how they get to the checklist and convinced myself that there's really not, short of manipulating the URL, there's really not a way to get to this through the app in any other way that would cause something bad. So I don't think there's anything worth extra testing here, is I guess the point. What else could we think through? Maybe there's one final thing, and that is, how would this print? So I don't have a printer handy. Whoops. Printing my chat window. That's definitely not the thing I want to print. Over here. So here's the print view of this. That's landscape. How does portrait look? Oh, that's very reasonable. There's nothing fancy here. It's got the breakdown. It's got some spacing. I think I like it. There are maybe some, if there are any like very solid weaknesses to this page, not terribly interesting. It's relying on typography and spacing to make it clear where stuff is, but I don't want to go overboard on putting background colors and really changing a lot of that stuff. especially bearing in mind that I believe that teachers are more likely to print this than anything else. So they probably don't want a lot of color and oddness. They're looking for checklists where they can cross stuff off. So I want to keep it simple, which makes my life easier too. Okay. Anything else in this diff? Nope, there's the whole template. I think we're good. So I'm going to commit this and deploy it, get some feedback. Hopefully we'll be able to report back next week. And from there, we will begin working on this ability to like filter out classes and filter out the courses that a user doesn't want to see and have some kind of memory of what that is. And so what modeling do we need to enable that, and think through that whole process. That's going to be the new data that will go into the system and will be useful. Thank you all for joining in. This content, this stream does go back and stays in the archive, so you can go back and view it and pull out any notes you have. I appreciate the discussion this evening. I thought there were good questions and comments, so thank you for that. Again, if you want to, easy ways to support me is you can like this content, give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you're not subscribed. If you feel motivated beyond that and you want to support me financially, you can do so at patreon.com. I'm super grateful for anybody that does, although I have no expectation that you would do, especially if you're not financially in a place where you can do that. So with that, I will tell you all good night and have a good one. Take care.